Welcome everybody to our meeting on affordable housing, our panel. Is this too loud? Bob was kind of frowning. Is it too loud? You're deaf?
I'll touch it.
Okay, touch it. I'm Corinne Salcedo. This is Fidalgo Democrats, for those who just wandered in. Thanks so much for showing up. A lot of people wondered whether we would still have our meeting because of the coronavirus. And I said, there aren't any cases in Skagit County. But then tonight I heard there is one case. And Barbara Cooper made the coffee, help yourself. Rita Sullivan made the cookies, and she brought cookies from the store as well. Zane Butler is our videographer who will tape the meeting. And then I'll send out the newsletter, and with it there will be a link to the meeting so you can open it. People who didn't come can see the meeting that way. We're getting double exposure that way. We're so happy about the videography. There's 25 copies of the newsletter back there on the table. And then the next day or two, well, when he sends me the link, then I send out the newsletter electronically to our list. So when you sign in, then you get on the email list. You sign an email address. Do we have any public officials here? I don't think so. So we have a couple candidates. Well, I was expecting two, but there's just one. See, should we do that now? Yes. Well, she's not quite ready, so I'll wait.
Whenever.
Okay.
Whatever works for you.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay.
Angie Hamola wants to come and announce her candidacy.
I just have to find my paper that I set down while getting ready for this. All right. Maybe I'm not ready.
Okay, we'll go on to the next thing then. And the next thing is Hannah Fishman, who's an organizer with SEIU. Here's Hannah, and she's going to speak to you about issues at Island Hospital. She's speaking for the union.
Hey, Angie, I think that your paper is here. Oh, you thought, okay, great. My name's Hannah. I'm an organizer for the Union of Service Workers at Island Hospital. We had someone who wanted to be here today who is a CNA, but actually because of the coronavirus, there's like a general recommendation that particularly people who work in healthcare avoid large meetings. So I'm here, direct any questions at me. So thank you so much for...
Why are you expendable?
Yeah. I am not expendable, it's just that I'm exposed to fewer people on a day-to-day basis. But thanks. So thanks so much for the opportunity to tell you all about the campaign that we're in for really improved patient care and making sure that Island continues to be a great public hospital in Anacortes that provides really excellent care. So you'll see everyone has like a little pamphlet, I think, on their seat. There are some extras in the back. We have been negotiating a new contract at Island for about a year now. Some of the motivating things that brought us to the table as CNAs, which are nursing assistants at Island, as housekeepers, people who work in the dietary department, who work in the lab, drawing your blood, who work in patient access, the people that you see when you walk into the hospital, is really maintaining a high standard of care at Island. We've seen really escalating high turnover at the hospital among our bargaining unit that's really concerned us. And a lot of difficulty recruiting people for these positions. These are the positions that are the lowest paid positions at the hospital. And frankly, the positions that don't get a lot of social respect, right? And so over time, we've seen that in comparison to some of the other area hospitals, wages at Island have really fallen behind. That's just flatly the case. So people are leaving. Or in 2019, I think 30% of people in our union turned over, which is really shocking, right? And we're not, pardon?
For a small town.
For a small town, yeah. Small hospital, small town, 30% turnover. And it gets higher in some of the jobs like nursing assistants, who probably are the people, if you're hospitalized, a nursing assistant is probably the person that you talk to the most, right? And so we just wanted to bring this message to everyone to say, hey, look, we really want to make sure that Island is a great place to work, a great place to receive care, but we really need some real improvements there to be able to maintain that high standard. And most of those improvements are around wages, so people don't feel compelled to leave. When you're making $16, $17 an hour, and you can make $3 more an hour by driving 30 minutes, that's a huge impact on the quality of life that you have, and just like your ability to pay your rent in this area. So I can take any questions, but we're asking people to do a couple things. One of which is, if you look at the back of your pamphlet, there's a supportislandcaregivers.org website. At that website, the first thing that you see is, here is how you send an email to the hospital CEO and to the Board of Commissioners. So if you can go there, send an email. There's a form email there. You can modify it as you wish. That goes directly to them, and that's a really appreciated piece of support. And then the other thing is that we had authorized what's called an informational picket, which is really everyone at the hospital's opportunity to kind of bring this message to the community by being in front of the hospital with picket signs in a big group. So we are honestly in Western Washington at the center of an epidemic that hasn't quite hit here yet, but will soon. So we had set a date for that picket, which was going to be March 18th, but we've canceled that because we have some, concerns about making sure that people stay safe. So we'll come back and ask people again when we set a new date. Hopefully this won't be that severe and won't last very long, but we don't really know. And I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Has anyone done any research on what the CEO is
Yes.
making? And
I'd love to tell you.
And why maybe that person can help balance what's going on there?
Yes. So, I couldn't possibly speak to the inner budgetary workings of the hospital, but we do know that the CEO, who's new, who just started, I think in November, is making, as a base wage, about $335,000 a year. In comparison to other small public hospital districts in Western Washington, that's quite a lot. That's like the highest for a very small hospital like this. There are CEOs who are making like $100,000 less in public hospital districts that are, 20% larger in terms of beds.
And so is the new CEO making the same as the last CEO that was?
The last
there for
CEO
20 some years?
made slightly more, but not much more. It's a similar wage bracket, yeah.
What does SEIU stand for?
Service Employees International Union. So our union is an international union, and then we have a local here in Washington State that's 1199 Northwest, that's just healthcare workers. Yeah.
Do you know offhand, has anybody done the math? You're asking for a 3% raise across the board?
We are asking, our current proposal is a 4% raise for the first year of the contract and a 4% across the board for the next year of the contract.
Has anybody done the math,
What that means in terms of like the hospital's budget? I think we've done the math the best that we can. We obviously are not like the experts in the hospital's budget, but from what we can tell with the information that we have, that's probably about an additional $250,000 a year. Yeah.
You mentioned that it makes other hospitals more attractive if they don't get a pay raise. I'm guessing if they're making $17 an hour, they probably don't live on Fidalgo Island anyway. So the other hospitals are probably already more attractive?
That's somewhat true. Probably about 30% of the people who work at the hospital live on Fidalgo Island. Most of the rest live in Oak Harbor. Yes.
So how many, are all the employees at the hospital a member of the union?
So our union is what's called like the service workers, which is kind of a demeaning phrase, but that's how it is in national labor law. And so the jobs that we do are as nursing assistants, nursing aides in the billing, like clerks in the billing department basically, people who do patient access work, so those people at the front desk when you go in, lab assistants and phlebotomists, people who work in the dietary department or in the kitchen and doing the food, people who clean the hospital, people who do sterile processing, which is like cleaning the surgical instruments and other sterile equipment, and like surgical technicians and pharmacy techs, things like that. Yes.
So this is a public hospital.
Yes.
What other pressure is there besides just picketing?
So that's the we would love it if simply sending letters to this, like email letters, supportislandcaregivers.org, to the CEO and the Board of Commissioners. That's, I think, a significant amount of public pressure. It is public, and you are their constituency. Inside the hospital, people have been taking lots of actions over the past year, so that's been a significant source of pressure as well.
What people? Employees or?
Yeah, our union members have been doing a variety of things, like bringing petitions to different bosses and managers, like wearing stickers that talk about what we're trying to do, just a variety of things. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I've been an RN for 51 years, and in North Dakota, I was an assistant director of a nursing home in charge of hiring and monitoring and evaluating the CNAs, that's the nursing assistants, and they paid very poorly. It was really difficult, and they were so chinchy that, like, I had a wonderful nursing assistant who had been there 17 years. She gave fabulous care. So I gave her a good evaluation. And my director of nursing called me in and tried to get me to lower the evaluation so they wouldn't have to pay her much of a salary increase. And the proposed increase per hour for her was 17 cents. So, I mean, when you go to the hospital or you're in the nursing home, a nursing assistant is who you have to count on. They're very important. And they used to say to me, I'm just a CNA. And I said, I don't ever want to hear you say just again. You know, you're very important.
I think I'm probably about out of time, right? Just about. Okay, yeah.
I mean, for months, I don't know how long, I've been seeing these signs up in people's yards around, and I didn't really know what it was all about. So how are you going to, I mean, coming to this meeting and talking to people, but to get more people in town to know what that is all about?
As we approach the picket date, we have some like letters to the editor that are like queued up and ready to go. We just didn't want to like release them until we got closer, and now it's been a bit of a reevaluation, but we'll get to that. Coming to things like this and talking to people, and then we're also going to try to do more on social media. Yeah.
There is a hospital board that's publicly elected and they have public meetings, right?
They do indeed.
Okay, well, there you go. If you knew the date of that, that would be useful.
The next one is next month. They are on Tuesdays, I believe, at noon at the hospital.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
One is, I wondered if you are told by the administration or your bosses that you're not allowed to talk about this at all among their patients. That's question one. And the second is maybe a suggestion. I believe Skagit County's county commissioners have videotaped meetings, and there's always an open comment period, at which time you can talk about anything you want. It's your right. And that would be a good way to get the message out. Just share with them, addressing the commissioners, but of a concern that affects all the citizens of Skagit County.
That's a wonderful suggestion. We will do that. Presuming they continue to have in-person meetings, we will be there. So the first question was, do bosses tell people not to talk about what's going on? And I think that it's kind of a discretionary thing. It would obviously be very awkward to bring up to a patient like out of the blue, and so it's not something that's not really something that happens. But sometimes we wear like stickers or something like that invites a question or invites a conversation, and that's in part because it's an opportunity to respond to a question with whatever's going on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, one more item before we go to our panel, and that's Angie Homola would like to come and make an announcement.
Good evening. I want to thank all of you for coming and thank Corrine Salcido for inviting me here. I think I've met many of you before. I am running for the Washington State House of Representatives 10th LD Position 1 seat this year, and 4 years ago I ran against Barbara Bailey for the Senate seat, did really well, but difficult to beat that machine. So I've entered this race, and I'm here just to introduce myself tonight. You're my first group for this race to talk to. I live on Whidbey Island, where I've lived for 23 years with my family. My husband retired from the Navy after 25 years there, and on Whidbey and other places. We raised our 2 children there, and what kind of got me involved in all of this and my passion about good government was I did a lot of community service work on Whidbey, being able to engage in our school system. I taught enrichment courses in science and architecture and art. And then from there, I started working on working at a local lagoon that's a coastal lagoon. There's only 5% left in the entire West Coast, and was working on a grant application to get some funding to protect the lagoon, and discovered a misappropriation of $500,000 of public funds. This was back in 2008. And that got me going to city and county meetings where you had 2 minutes at the microphone, and then you sat down and policy setters set policy against what the public wanted, usually. So I realized that in order to really make effective change, I would need to be a policy setter. So going from a transition of being an architect and a mom to running for government office was a huge step. I did succeed by just 62 votes. I'm in a very conservative area, had to do a hand recount. I took office in 2008 during our Great Recession, and discovered very quickly that Island County would be insolvent in 5 years if we didn't cut 20% of our budget. So I worked really hard to accomplish that, establish some efficiencies, and was able to earn the county a AA bond rating, protected our parks. While we did this, there was efforts to cut WSU Extension, and our Conservation Futures funds worked really hard to protect that. Something else I think I'm kind of proud of was, as a commissioner, we had an application come to us from this group that reviewed services for indigent veterans. And there was a woman with 6 children, and her husband had cancer, and she had asked for a little bit of money out of this indigent veterans fund for her utilities. And the answer was, no, go get a job. So I discovered that we had no policies for how to allocate the money, so crafted some policies, got somebody full-time. It's a complicated mix of how that's budgeted, and I would like to fix that in Olympia so we can really help our veterans, but we did in Island County go from serving 5 to 100 in the first year. Fought the finfish net pens, got a clean water utility, which was a big step. Helped with a lot of efficiencies within our department, brought all of our department heads and elected officials together for the first time. And for the first time after 2 years of trying to get some support from my fellow commissioners, we finally got cameras in the room to videotape our meetings available to the public, which it's not live at the moment, but you can watch it, so you would be able to be shown if people watch that. And finally provided our agendas and minutes available to the public for them to review. So I took that and my other skills, having worked as a laborer and a carpenter and a machinist in my previous life, to task to try to go to the state to support you. I did not succeed in that effort. I, in the meantime, earned an environmental law and policy master's degree, so I have a really keen sense of concern for our planet and our future, and would like to see us try to do the best we can for future generations. That's really important to me. And I would like to be able to help with, some people here might be in the 10th and some people in the 40th. So I think we're sort of very intertwined, and it would be good to be able to help work with the legislators for the 40th. I've actually been in touch with a lot of them. I'm really interested to see what the affordable housing folks have to talk about, because I've been serving on Washington State Democrats Party as a state committee woman for the Island County Democrats, and helped form the Environment and Climate Caucus, and we have been working very hard for the last 4 years to move resolutions forward to try to get bills passed. And some of those bills this year we tried to help support for accessory dwelling units, but unfortunately, and maybe you'll speak to it, there were some poison pills in those bills that unfortunately tied the hands of local governments from being able to adopt restrictions and guidelines. I designed an accessory dwelling unit in Anacortes about a year ago, and they have a great code that says if you're going to put impervious surfaces in, you need to put in rain gardens, you need to deal with any landscaping that you removed, you need to put back landscaping in its natural species, and they removed the ability for cities and counties to be able to do that. And scariest of all was they removed the administrative and judicial appeals process, which means for any regulations that cities and counties adopt, which is very concerning. It takes away the whole legal extension to the public for those regulations. And there was one bill that was really good. I think I was able to help encourage that to be removed. It almost made it through, and then at the last minute they threw that back in again. So I'm not sure if it's making it right now. So I brought some handouts at the back of the table. I'm really eager to go to Olympia for you. I'm passionate about this. I feel super strongly about good government and the rule of law, and I'm really opposed to politics and corruption. And if you work hard and you get things done, the opposition comes after you, and I can tell you lots of stories about that in my amazing efforts, both at the county commissioner and for the state Senate seat. But I think if we don't fight back, if we lay down for bullies, we end up with tyrants and dictators in office. So if you want somebody that's going to work hard for good government, you really have to be willing to fight those efforts. So Angie Hamola, I'd love to have your support. There's some brochures and some sign-up sheets that are going around. I'm not sure when, Karina, I'll talk about the parks. So sit down and do that later.
Oh, no, do it now.
Okay.
Oh, and I'll make sure they know exactly what seat you're running for.
Okay. I'm running for the House of Representatives in the 10th Legislative District, Seat 1. Seat 2 is occupied now by Dave Paul, who also lives on Whidbey Island, and he was an administrator at Skagit Valley College, so he's fantastic to have there. This is the seat that's been occupied by Nora Smith, Republican, for the last 10 years, and she has announced she's not running again, so it's an open seat. There are 3 other people running for this seat as a Democrat, so this will be a challenge. I decided I was going to try to be very respectful of the gentleman who was coming back from his last attempt, and then 2 other members joined on. So at this point, I think it's up to any one of us to try to be the strongest at that position. I've reached out to the other candidates, 3 out of the 4, to ask, please, if whoever goes forward, we need to endorse the others, because we have to try to take these seats back with whoever can make it forward, and I'm hoping that the others will oblige that. So I would answer any questions, but I don't know what the time schedule is, and I have one other thing to talk about.
Let's go ahead with the island.
So one of the things that we've been working on, it was brought to our attention by a gentleman that used to live on Whidbey Island, but he now has moved out to Port Townsend. And he's really engaged, and we have another group on Whidbey Island called Whidbey Environmental Action Network. And they discovered that the Navy, the United States military, had a permit to use 5 Washington state parks that's going to expire on April 30th of this year. And they used those 5 state parks for dropping seals in the water. The seals would swim up onto the beach and get picked up there. Seals being humans in camouflage, not the pit of heads. So It's actually totally against Washington State's WACs and RCWs for that use in parks, but they were able to do that. So now, in 2017 and 18, the military prepared their environmental assessment, not an EIS, which is environmental impact study. They decided they didn't need the full study. They did an environmental assessment and determined there would be no significant impact to use 29 Washington State parks and 31 public city and county parks to not only pick people up off the beach, but to do what they're calling covert infiltration training. So they will be totally in camouflage, and their intent is to not be perceived by the visitors of the park. They will move up to the upland areas within the brush to stay for 2 to 72 hours, using the unsuspecting park visitors as subjects for this training, including at several parks, paintball guns that have the same weight and same look as military weapons. And they will practice those in some of these parks. That whole permit process is going forward. The first meeting was going to be in Chelan, nowhere near any of the parks. That's been canceled due to the coronavirus, and the next meeting is scheduled for out on Port Townsend, May 6th and 7th. We're trying really hard to get people's thoughts and opinions on this, so there is a sign-up sheet if you want to sign a petition. There's also one on change.org. If you just put in military parks or training in Washington State parks, you'll find a petition. 3,366 people had signed it as of today. I'm the wife of a retired military aviator, and I get it, that we need to be able to train our military, but I also firmly believe that they go to work to protect the citizens of our country and our safety and our freedom, and that we value our parks and our open space, and especially our wilderness area. It's supposed to be untrammeled by man, and that is not the place to be training for people who are out enjoying the wilderness with their children, picnicking, trying to have some peace and quiet, reminisce or hike or camp. There's other places to practice, and I would hope that people will sign on to this. Thank you very much. Oh, you can go to my website, which should be live soon, which will be angieforall.com, and I have an email address, angieforall, 10thld, @gmail.com. Thank you very much. And some handouts on the back table. I could just pass it around if you would prefer.
And you're available later for questions?
You bet.
Okay, now we'll go to our panel on affordable housing. The first one is Dustin Johnson, who lives in Anacortes. He's been the executive director of the Anacortes Family Center for the last 7 years. Before that, he worked in Seattle for more than 10 years, managing organizations that dealt with housing, community development, and justice for abused and neglected kids. I'll just go ahead and introduce all of you. And the second one is Katie Stevens. She lives in Bellingham, is that correct? In Bellingham. She works in Mount Vernon. She's housing program manager at Community Action for Skagit County. And besides being housing program manager, she also directs the Skagit Coalition to End Homelessness. Prior to that, she was with the Northwest Regional Council's Aging and Disabilities Program, helping seniors and disabled persons live independently. She has also worked with Peace Health and with Whatcom County Health Department. Sorry, I couldn't read it. She completed her master's in social work in 2016 with a concentration in administrative policy and a certificate in nonprofit management. And for fun, she's a referee for the Bellingham Roller Betties. And thirdly is Bud Anderson. He lives on South Fidalgo. So Angie, he's in the 10th. He's retired after 44 years at Shell Refinery in Anacortes as an electrical engineer. Bud serves on the boards of No More Bombs and Transition Fidalgo and Friends. He owns a small electrical contracting company, Washington Electric. He's involved in building mini houses in the Anacortes area to provide affordable housing. He's a strong supporter of WSU scholarship programs and various environmental groups, Whitby Playhouse, Boy Scouts, and etc. Okay, so is that a good order in which to speak, Dustin?
Whatever you want.
Okay. I figured you last because you were about a solution, whereas they're going to talk about problems.
Well, I was hoping they'd present solutions also.
We'll see. And you can either speak up here or stand at the table with the microphone, whichever is your choice.
But you want us to stand either way?
But stand either way, they can hear you better. A lot of us are kind of hard of hearing.
Okay.
And please reserve your questions until they're finished speaking, and then I'll moderate a discussion. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Dustin Johnson. I'm the director of the Anacortes Family Center. I'll be rather brief. I know a lot of you know about the Family Center. Just for quick reference, is there anybody in the room that has never heard about the Anacortes Family Center? That's what I figured. Oh, Angie, and I'm in your district, so let's talk. So the Family Center has been around. We'll turn 11 this December. We just turned 10 last December. So we provide solutions for emergency shelter for women, kids, and families with kids, transitional shelter, which is additional support for families that need additional time, additional support in order to reach self-sufficiency. And then the last step of our what we call continuum of care has been affordable housing. We opened our project December 1st for residents, and we provide 20 units of affordable housing. Most of those units are for families making under 60% of median income, and there's also some individual folks in that group, including single men. So that is a population that in the history of AFC we have not served, but in affordable housing we do. Thanks to a grant from Skagit County from a real estate excise tax that the Washington legislature passed last year, we purchased a piece of property that shares the northern border with the project we just developed on 26th Street across the street from the emergency room. That piece of land is the exact same dimension, both in breadth and depth, as the current project that we just built, and shares the same zoning as that project. So, for all intents and purposes, we could build the exact same project over again on that lot. However, one of the things that we've been working on and really lamenting over for the last at least 5 years, and the single largest impediment to our families achieving self-sufficiency in employment and emergency and transitional shelter, has been childcare. It is the single biggest issue that we see in Anacortes. That is not our skill set and not our mission, and we're very acutely aware of that. But we're really tired of talking about that problem. So my board of directors, who is a phenomenal, probably the most powerful board I've ever worked with or seen, and that's including my time in Seattle and other areas, decided that we would dedicate some space in the current project that we're working on 26th to childcare. We will partner with a third-party provider that is experienced and certified in childcare, and we will lease that to them. And in exchange for some rent, we will designate some of those spots for kids that are coming from our program, but the majority of those spots are going to be designated for community kids. So it'll very much be a community benefit. The project that AFC is going to work on 26th Street, by and large, about $3 million of it will be paid for thanks to the affordable housing tax increase, sales tax increase that was passed in the last election by over 55% of Anacortes voters, including many of you, and thank you so much for that support. There was going to be a speaker from the Housing Authority here tonight, and I was asked to touch on their projects as well. So in addition to the 20 units plus childcare, by the way, the Anacortes Family Center project total cost will be probably in the neighborhood of $4.25 million. $3 million of that will be covered by the sales tax increase. The remaining funds will be collected either from a capital grant from the state legislature, grants from local county government, but also fundraised, and we are actively fundraising for that project. The Housing Authority will be the recipient of the balance of the funds from the affordable housing sales tax increase. I believe it's allotted to be about $6 million for the Housing Authority, and there will be a 25% reserve And that is calculated based on the significant dips we saw in the economic recession of 2008 in sales tax revenue. So the balance of $6 million will be going toward, I believe, about 1.5, and again, I am not with the Housing Authority. I'm speaking from experience of having done 1,000 community presentations, so excuse me if any of this is not exactly accurate, but I'm pretty sure it's close. So about $1.5 million of that will be used for a five-home townhouse project that will be developed around 19th and O on existing land that the Housing Authority owns. And then the remainder of that money, along with some money from the Historic Preservation Trust, will be used to rehabilitate the Olson building, maintaining commercial space on the ground floor and putting 20 studios above. And the goal will be to retain as much of the outward facades of that building as possible, but they don't quite know when when that will go and how that will go, because they just haven't been in to see kind of the really intense needs that may exist in a building that's over 100 years old. Quickly on timelines, we anticipate that we are currently working on civil engineering. We have a donated civil engineer that's doing some work for us, Dale Herringston. We are currently working on the design specs and working to find a third-party childcare provider that wants to partner with us. We hope to submit for permits and break ground this winter for substantial completion about a year after that. The Housing Authority project for the townhouses is going to proceed hopefully sometime this year, breaking ground. The Olson building does not have a date, I don't believe at this point, but they are going to start working on feasibility for that building and assessment of needs. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the Anacortes Family Center is doing in terms of housing. In terms of community need, I can tell you this. The Housing Authority has had a wait list for over 5 years for studio and one-bedroom units. The Anacortes Family Center did not announce that we began accepting applications for our building before it was full and we could actually fill it the next day. That was before we announced to the community that we were leasing up. So that gives you an appreciation for just the intense need. The housing sales tax measure passed because there is a prioritization for Anacortes and Fidalgo Island residents that will be given at both organizations. So we will very much serve the health aides that live and, work and want to live in our community. The folks that work at our pharmacy, the people that work in our retail establishments, at our hotel and motels, the people that are in Anacortes that make our lives enriched and better, and deserve to be a part of our community in every way, including living here. There's also a big environmental component to affordable housing, because right now we have a lot of folks that have childcare in Mount Vernon, maybe live in Mount Vernon, work here. So they drop their kids off, come back, go and pick their kids up, maybe come back to work another shift, and then go back across the bridge. And that commuting alone creates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, obviously. So not only is there a social justice slant to affordable housing, a community enrichment and just a community betterment component, but also very much an environmental component of this. Did I kind of cover the
Very well.
Very good. So we'll be open to questions, and thank you so much for your opportunity to come out and speak.
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Katie, and thank you very much for sharing everything that's going on in Anacortes. I think that it really is impressive to see the way that Anacortes is wrapping around its community and putting affordable housing as a top priority. So you're a role model for Skagit County. Thank you. So again, I'm at Community Action of Skagit County, where I am the housing program manager, and that's the hat that I'm wearing today. I also am chair for the Skagit Coalition to End Homelessness, so if there are questions about that, I can do my best to answer questions on that. But I figured I was asked to talk about affordable housing, and in my position as housing program manager, I can't talk about affordable housing without talking about homelessness and vice versa, right? So I figured I would just give a little bit more details about the need for affordable housing. And then I'll talk just a little bit about the types of programs that we have at Community Action, including our housing programs, because we do so much. But I did want to share with you that there's a statistic, and it comes from Skagit County Public Health. They have a little dashboard on their website, and they shared, this is a not just Skagit County statistic, but it's a statewide, maybe even national statistic that says for every $100 increase in a median monthly rent, it can result in a 39% increase of homelessness within rural and suburban areas. So as we're watching the cost of housing go up, there is a correlation with an increase in homelessness, because the cause of homelessness is the inability to be in a home, oftentimes because it's unaffordable, right? So I bring that up to recognize that we're in a bit of a, some people say we're in a housing crisis, right? The cost of housing is becoming unattainable for a lot of people, not only to buy, but also to rent. And from the conversations that I've been a part of here in Anacortes, I'm understanding that a big push for these projects is because you're recognizing that that cost of housing is becoming out of grasp, out of reach, as we would say. And your priority, your goal is to make sure that everyone who wants to live in this beautiful community has the opportunity to do that. And you're especially concerned about those who are in service role positions, making sure that they can afford to be here. So I applaud you for these efforts that you're doing. In Skagit County as a whole, so Anacortes is included, about 30% of all households pay more than they can afford for housing. So that's a lot of families that are cost burdened by their housing. And when families are cost burdened by their housing, they have to make very difficult choices about how to use what limited funds or limited income they do have available to them. They might have to make difficult choices about their employment decisions and taking on additional employment. Maybe that means reducing their time with families or focusing on their own health, etc. So there's a bigger cost to the inability to afford your housing. What else can I tell you? The other just kind of numbers, this comes from the most recent county 5-year plan to end homelessness. So they've put out a report every 5 years. And in that report, they wrote that at least 1,700 individuals in our community experience homelessness over the course of a year. And it's not uncommon for households that are coming to one of our coordinated entry sites, which is where someone can say, I need some help with housing or rental assistance. It's not uncommon for them to wait longer than a year before they can actually access any kind of help. So just as Dustin was telling us, the need is very, very high. At Community Action, we do our best to provide a variety of different programs that help make those difficult decisions about how to use your limited income and stretch it as far as you can. We try and make that a little bit easier. So we have a lot of different anti-poverty programs. Food services being a big part of that. We have the Food Distribution Center out in Cedar Woolley, and that supports many of the food banks here in Skagit County. And they pack food boxes for residents that are low income in Skagit County, and those food boxes are delivered to those that can't make it to food banks. That's a huge service for our community members in ensuring that they get the nutrition that they need to maintain their health. We have energy assistance programs which help people to be able to pay their utilities and avoid shutoffs. In our housing programs, there's a variety of different housing programs that we operate, including emergency shelter, prevention programs where we help people to work with their landlords to pay any kind of rental arrears that they may have, and work out payment plans so that they can stay in their housing and not end up back out on the streets. We do have rapid rehousing programs which are meant to help people to find housing, and then we pay a subsidy towards their rent where the client pays a portion and then we balance out the remaining amount. that allows them to get their feet underneath them and work on whatever essential skills they need to work on to be able to sustain that rent long-term on their own. In a recent conversation with Anacortes Housing Authority, they brought up a really important observation that a healthy housing market, if you will, would be a housing market that has stepping stones of affordability, where maybe there are really high-end, really expensive houses available, and there's really, really accessible or lower income housing, and then there's housing that's in between. Our communities are moving more towards the inaccessible housing rates, which makes it difficult for clients that are in our housing programs to be able to graduate and sustain their housing on their own, which means that the programs that we have had, which have historically been short-term, time-limited, our clients have come into our programs, received assistance for maybe a year maximum, with lots of support and coaching in that year. And historically, we've seen them fly after that time in our program, and they're able to sustain their rent on their own. Recently, however, clients have been having a difficult time graduating from our programs, which means that they are receiving our rental assistance for longer and longer, which means that we don't get to enroll new people into our programs, which makes the wait time even longer to get into a program. So you can see the cycle, it just keeps on growing. So those were the main points I wanted to share. We can't talk about housing affordability without also talking about homelessness and vice versa. And absolutely the solution to homelessness is affordable housing. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation today, and I'll look forward to questions.
Well, I'm Bud Anderson, and I want to give a big shout out to one of my local heroes, Corrine. I attend as many of the Democrat meetings as I can, probably about a third of them, because I'm real busy. I'm working on affordable housing. How's that?
You can take that mic out of the holder.
Okay. I can fix it. Oh, hey, there, I think I just did, John. Oh. Thank you. Sorry. That was better. How tall are you? Not very tall. Thank you, John. So I've been asked to speak for about 10 minutes, and I'll do that. And then if you have any questions afterward. So I worked at the refinery, and that was a great career. But I was really a hobbyist. And so I was a guy, nights and weekends, I'd always add a room onto the house or help a friend build a house or whatever. So that's kind of my real passion. And then after I retired in 2012, I basically went into full-time contracting, house building, remodeling, et cetera, et cetera. So I do it because I like it. And I don't do it because I'm trying to make a lot of money or make a big splash. So what Katie talked about, I've seen firsthand. I mean, we have tons of people, friends, that are looking for affordable housing or kids, et cetera, et cetera. So I really get it. And I think there's probably 4 or 5 solutions to this problem. And I have one solution, and I'd like to share that with you tonight. Sorry, Lynn. So my talk, again, I've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to be very vague. These are round numbers, but they're notional, and I think you'll get the point at the end of my talk. So we'll try to get this out. There we go. How do you get it out?
Pull toward you.
Toward me. There we go. Thank you. So let's look at the round numbers. Now I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. Here's my solution. Make thousands of affordable houses in Anacortes because you convert a garage to a house. It's that simple. Now, as I've driven around Anacortes, I'm going to say the last 5 years, I've probably seen 50 or 60 or 100 of these. People are doing it on their own. So I didn't invent this, but I'm endorsing it. So here's the numbers. Let's just say there's 16,000 people on the island. Let's say half of them live in houses. So we got 8,000 housing units. Let's say half of those have garages. We have 4,000 units. So I contend, let's just say we're magic, because I believe in Peter Pan and magic, that we have a potential of 4,000 low-cost housing units in Anacortes right now. Okay, so how much do they cost? I live on the end of Haddon. Does everybody know where Haddon is? There's a development there, and the people that developed that went to the city council, and they talked about putting in houses, and they were going to put in 2 affordable houses. What a joke. The price on those houses are $500,000, $600,000, and $700,000. So listening to Katie and Dustin, I don't get it on where the affordable housing is. And if you're the hospital worker and you're making $17 an hour, I don't get it. Unless you have parents that are just plain wealthy, you're not going to make it. So let's take a look at the basic numbers. Land is about $200,000. You can't buy a lot less than $200,000 in Anacortes. So let's say you're one of these 4,000 people. Okay, that's case A. But the other case, if you're going to build new, you've got land. A small house is $300,000 for a total of 5. Medium size, like 2,000 square feet, $400,000 for a total of 6. And a large home, $500,000 for a total of 7. My numbers are 0 for the land, $50,000 for the house. I have a partner, Brian Scott. We've built 3 houses, just 2 of us, last year. Now it gets a little personal, so I don't want to identify names or tell you exact costs, but the range is $50,000. We're building 2 more this year. It'll be in the same range. Now, be a little careful, there's a trap here. It means you've got the garage. If you don't have the garage, these costs easily double. Got a few friends in the audience. There's an A and a B drawing. If you give one A and one B drawing to me and everyone else here, that'd be good. So to give you a concept of this house, it's, I grew up and everybody had a room. All the kids had a bedroom, you had a living room, and a dining room. Well, the actual architecture these days for homes now, you basically have a great room, which is really your kitchen, dining room, living room, bedrooms and bathrooms. Now, what's the one space in a house that's total waste? Who knows what just a total waste in every house, the house I live in and probably you folks live in?
Hallway.
Thank you. Think about it, a hall's a total waste. So objective 1, get rid of any hall. Objective 2, make common spaces, multi-use spaces. Now, if I just graduated from high school and I've joined the nursing union and I'm making $17 an hour, I don't need to have a big 2,000 square foot house with lots of rooms and bathrooms. I just need a place to live that's safe, that's modern, that's clean, and it's in town. And I can do that for $50,000 and I can rent to that person or sell it to them and they can live. Okay, so we've got 2 floor plans. And these are actual plans, now just very basic, I didn't give the dimension drawing ones, of what we did on garages again last year. The basic numbers are, it's usually 20 by 22 or 22 by 24. So this is a 2-car garage. The first one we did a year and a half ago actually was a 2-car garage with a workshop, and we only converted one bay, and the workshop is about a 300 square foot footprint, and it still works. So this is Unit B. So if you folks would like to go to Unit B, I'm going to give you an idea of the floor plan. And again, every one that we've done actually has almost an identical floor plan, so this works. What we have here is a 24 by 22 2-car garage. It's a few blocks from here. It was a, I think, 90-year-old house, 90-year-old garage, so really old foundation. On this wall, we actually took sledgehammers and we pounded it in. So you take a 90-year-old derelict garage, you put in a new floor, insulate it, change the walls from 2x4 to 2x6 by adding just 2x2s on the outside, insulate it, insulate the ceiling so you have very little heat loss. This is a very efficient home. And the floor plan is unique. Here's a door. Here's a sliding glass door. You come in the home. Here's the kitchen. This is a living space. This particular lady had a rolling center aisle, which is kind of convenient. A couple bar stools, so this is where she eats, her dining room. Washer dryer in the room. There's really only one enclosed room, and that's the bathroom. This is 5 feet by 7 feet, small but big enough. You've got a tub with a shower, your toilet, your sink. This area is actually open, it's her bedroom. Closet. Bring a sub panel from the home, so you've got your own electric source. You've got a heat source, which is just a mono heat source. One heat source, thermostat across the room. It keeps the entire facility at a constant temperature with very little energy consumption. A fan in the center for both when it's really hot in the summer to circulate air, and in the winter to keep the heat moving and low. So this design with variations is what we built. That costs $50,000. Double car. As an ADU, we follow all the rules, we get inspected. However, to make the 4,000 work, I think we really need the support of the city and city council. You know, you've got to be lenient on your rules. For example, parking requirements and other requirements. And remember, we're upgrading 100-year-old buildings, and let's not make it too tough on us. Let's not make it too expensive. This works. I know it works. We're doing it, and we're going to continue to do it and provide affordable housing to Anacortes. Thank you so much.
So Will, let's bring her over here. So we'll have our discussion now, and I know that these homes exist. Our steering committee is going to go and visit one tomorrow. Meet Bud there. I'm looking forward to seeing a happy home. So raise your hand with your question, or it could be a comment too. And Angie's going to be first. I'll take you in order and say who it's for. Is it for anybody or a particular one? And say your name so everybody can get to know you. And we'll have plenty of time. We have till 9 o'clock. And I'm going to bring the microphone to you. And then I'll bring it back to whoever it's for.
Just hold it out here for the virus.
Hold it up.
So my name is Angie, and one of my question I have has to do with several of these bills that supposedly would provide affordable housing with accessory dwelling units, which is a lot like what Bob is proposing here, or has done here. And what troubled me is that the way to make them affordable supposedly was to allow these accessory dwelling units to go in all over the place and then make the permit fee half the price of what the house, the single-family dwelling would be, which is, if it's tiny, is going to be maybe $400 or $800, and to make impact fees half of what the existing impact fees would be. But that doesn't assure affordability, and I think one of the things people do oftentimes is turn them into B&Bs or rent them at a high cost. So I'm wondering if you have a mechanism that would be helpful that we can share with legislators, that how do you set the rent for the house such that it is affordable? Is there some real estate measurements? I'm thinking we could look at the assessed values of the homes and then only ask for 60%, or something like that that would assure that if you do these things, they're not just going to be rented as high as they can possibly be rented.
Who's it for?
Anyone.
Anyone. Each and all. Dustin wants to be first.
So, if we're talking about rental units, so the Anacortes Family Centers project on 27th was paid for almost exclusively with private donations. There was no mechanism that required it to be affordable. However, what we did was we put a deed against the property for 40 or 50 years, and this is something that's been borrowed by the Washington State Housing Trust Fund and HUD for years and years and years, that ensures that if an organization, particularly a for-profit, because nonprofits tend to get into the business because they want to solve a community need for a long term, but for-profit businesses, it ensures that even if they sell the property, it stays in its intended use. And you can do that with a very simple transaction fee of $75 at the auditor's office. So it's incredibly affordable. It's a very easy piece of paper to execute. In terms of setting rents, what AFC did, in spite of not needing to meet HUD restrictions per se, because we didn't receive any HUD or federal funding, we set the HUD rents based on unit size and based on income. So a 2-bedroom unit, even on the top floor with the most beautiful views you've ever seen in Anacortes, we are at 60% income, we're charging $855 a month. For our studio units, for a wounded veteran or a young lady that was born without use of her left side, they're at 30%, and their rent for their studio is just about $400 a month. And HUD sets those rents based on the incomes of the area, and usually they also assess sort of what unit costs are on the rental market as a whole. And so there's Anacortes specific, there's Skagit County specific, and then there's something that marries those. So there's already those tools very much in place.
Great. And so Bob, then if you go get a permit for the little conversion of the garage, when you get the permit, is it permitted in such a way that it's called an accessory dwelling unit or something, so that maybe it can have a rent control?
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, these houses are permitted. Are there any rent controls on it? I'm simplifying your question. Okay, the answer is they're permitted. There's no controls at all, 0. Now, I have a disagreement with the city on ADU units, and it actually kind of challenges what you said. Is I don't think there should be any limits on when you do an ADU. Right now in Anacortes, you have to live on the property 50% of the time.
I agree.
Well, and actually the first time I gave this talk, I think here, there were 2 city council people here. Actually, it was a transition, and they brought that up, and that was a big deal to them. It wasn't to me. I think if you flood the market with 4,000 units, I think a lot of those units will be rented by local people. So, but to really solve the problem, as you implied, I think it takes a shift in philosophy, and the shift is going to be this. What I would do is have the city pay for half the cost. instead of you getting a permit for $2,000 or whatever, have the city give you $25,000, you spend $25,000, and then you have a contract for 40 years or whatever. I think if you work that economics out, and let's say you rent that for $600 a month, the person that signed that contract is going to make money. For a $25,000 investment, you're going to get $6,000. That's almost a 4-in-1 return. That's great for 40 years. And you get low-cost housing. But it takes a mayor and a city council that cares and is willing to step out of the box and look for solutions. That's the tough part.
I do agree, you shouldn't have to live there.
Have you talked to the city about that?
The city doesn't like my ideas. I talked to them about that development that I referenced. They have their own way.
I just wanted to add 2 small points, which is that, bills that come forward like this, that I think the idea is to incentivize more housing development, which in turn helps us with our vacancy rates. And so you'll hear in conversations about housing and affordable housing, people use the term vacancy rate. And that describes how many units are available in a community, and of those units, how many of them can be rented by someone or available to be rented. They're not occupied yet. So in Skagit County, our vacancy rate for, I think, 2 bedrooms and certainly for 1 bedrooms has been at 0% for at least since April of 2019, if not longer. So that tells you that there are not enough units for anybody in our community to be able to get into, let alone the conversation of affording it. So any kind of measure that incentivizes more development and bringing more units to our community is going to, in the long run, assist us with making sure that anyone who wants to be in this community can. I just wanted to add that.
Okay. I think Ruth was next. You still have a question? No. You forgot.
Lynn does.
So our unit, who was it? The third. It was Wim. And then Jean.
Good evening, my name is Wim Hoopermans. I don't want to talk about relieving the symptoms, I want to talk about the cause. The richest employer that we have has a housing problem. It's the Whitby Navy. And instead of building on the base, they exploited all their troubles by just giving every officer and who knows what a healthy stipend to find a house in Anacortes, Oak Harbor, in Skagit Valley. So it's very easy to address this problem, and let's make a law. The Navy can only house its people on the base. That would resolve clear up a lot of houses here right away. The other cause for the problem is rich people. Rich people buy second houses, and second houses turn into VRBOs. We can regulate VRBOs. Tell me you agree or how wrong I am.
I'm a Navy spouse, so it's a little bit tough I'll say this. I don't agree on the first point. The Navy's been here for years, and I think could be argued that we wouldn't have a community without the Navy. So does that across the board solve the problem? No. And I think we can do better, and there are employers that employ far more people in this community that can certainly do more to address this issue. In terms of VRBOs, there are some laws, and I'll look to you, Angie, when you're elected to help these along, that deal with Airbnbs and VRBOs, that help to make those issues sort of, especially for second, third homes, and Senator Lovelit, I think, has sponsored a couple that have made it fairly far, and I don't know that they'll make it all the way, probably because of Eastern Washington, but they are certainly working on that.
I guess what I would say is that I think you're speaking to demand on limited availability. And regardless of what the entity is that is demanding our available housing, the housing shortage is across Washington state and all up and down the West Coast, and it's spreading across the nation. So it's not a Skagit County problem. It's not just a Washington state problem in terms of the availability and affordability of housing. So it's hard to say that it's a cause and effect kind of relationship with the Navy or even rich people and being able to rent out units for vacation dwellers, etc. So that's my point, is just that it's bigger, it's across the nation, and it really, it's kind of just our social systems and structures and how we've developed and things that we need to start addressing in terms of more infill within communities and prioritizing making sure that people can live in the communities where they want to be. Anything to add?
Actually, I support Wim's comments. There's a lot of Navy people. We have several rental homes. I'll be really honest with you. I could basically 50 to 100% increase rent on every home I own and get it. And a lot of that's the Navy.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were such a big landlord.
Be nice.
You'd be nice. Okay, I think Jean, you were next.
Yeah.
Say your full name.
Okay, Jean Olmsted. And yeah, I'm not quite sure who to direct the questions to, but I just wondered, number one, I'm just curious about what happens to people in your programs or your housing once they get on their feet and they're making more than 60% of the AMI. Then do you have to kick them out? Or, I mean, that seems like it would be a terrible dilemma. And I wondered how you deal with that. I was also wondering if there are mechanisms in place, so say somebody has an ADU and they're willing to rent it to a low-income person but can't afford to charge, what they can afford to pay. Is there a mechanism for ADU owners to get a stipend like you were talking about, or I don't know, a property tax reduction, or just curious about that.
So to answer your question on what happens to people if they income eligibility out of our programs. So the goal of the Family Center has always been to achieve self-sufficiency. We do a white paper every year of our emergency shelter that serves us single women, families with kids. So single dad with kids, no matter what the family configuration looks like. We served about 310 people last year in our emergency programs. Of those, 86% graduated successfully, meaning that they found a stable, permanent place to call home. Some of those people in Anacortes, some of those not, but they found a safe, permanent place to call home. One of the cool things that I think that we found out in our white paper that Darby Brown, who is a program analyst of years and years and years, does for us as a volunteer, but deep dives and scrubs our files to find this data, is that every single person that enters our emergency programs meet the federal eligibility definition of being in poverty. What we found is by the end of our emergency program, so that's 90 days in the emergency shelter, 52% of those families not only graduated with a permanent safe place to call home, but 52% of those families no longer met the federal definition of being in poverty. And the reason and the way that we did that was by connecting them with jobs in the community that pay significantly more than minimum wage. And that's always been an important part of our program. To the point about, once somebody hits 60%. So we have a provision worked in, and because we don't have HUD funding, we're allowed to do this. Basically have a 10% give. So if a person receives a promotion at work or a small raise, more than cost of living, but meritoriously awarded or whatever, we can provide a buffer and not immediately terminate services for somebody. But the hope is that the folks that are in these units are in need and don't have other options. So our answer to that has been increase the supply of housing across the board, really, but also make sure that there are provisions in place to allow that. A lot of funding doesn't allow that because we have not taken state and federal money. We can. Does that answer your question?
Comments on affordability for landlords?
Oh, rental assistance.
So right now, there are not any programs that that can assist with, I guess, a difference in a rental rate that a landlord would want to set. We work with private landlords. We don't own property at this time. And so a lot of landlords will ask, well, how do we set a rental rate? How do we make that determination? Well, the answer is it is up to you, and you do have to decide, maybe consider if you're still paying off a mortgage or other costs for building that unit. Factor that into your decision making. And we do guide people to the fair market rate that Dustin was referring to earlier, set by Housing and Urban Development. But ultimately, it's up to the landlord to decide what to charge a tenant. I will say that the Department of Commerce recently created a new program to make the cost of being a landlord for tenants in rental assistance programs like the state programs and HUD programs. They created this new program that makes it a bit more affordable, and it's called the Landlord Mitigation Funds. And that program helps to pay the cost of damages that a tenant causes in a unit while they're staying. And it also can help to pay the cost of getting a unit to meet the inspection standards that have to be done before a rental voucher can be used. So these programs are designed to make it a little bit easier for landlords to work with clients on rental assistance types of programs. Does that answer your question? Sort of.
Who's next? Maureen always has a good question. You do?
Okay, I'm in the process of ripping down my garage in the next couple weeks for an ADU, and the reality is that I love what Bud's come up with, and what I have to share is that if you have an 80-year-old structure like I have, often they have no foundation, no slab, no windows. In my situation, we have to rip the whole thing down. And of course, you have demolition permits. You have to have the permit for building. That was $900 for the permit for an 18 by 18 square foot building. And these are 20 by 24, more or less. So 2/3 the size. And then what's come in is in 2017, the structure as a garage rebuild and not an ADU was estimated at $40,000. Now it's estimated at $50,000, but if I run it as an ADU, it's $60,000 to $75,000, and that's just an 18 by 18 structure. And the situation I'm in is that had I done this 10 years ago, I'd be much further ahead. But today, even if I rented that out at $10,000 a year, it's still going to take me 7.5 years to pay it off. That doesn't include any of the maintenance, repairs from renters being in there, or the property tax increase. So, I mean, there's the reality that it's a great idea. It's just that the city is not there to help support those people that want to do this. And it might be the county too is not there to support it. So in the situation is that the structure had to be redone anyways, but for me to turn into the ADU will be at least $25,000 more than just a garage of 18 by 18. That's all.
Any comment on that? Probably not.
I just want to say, I think what you were talking about, this little ADU that I was
accessory dwelling and attached garage in the preliminary stage of the plans, took it to a contractor, made sure we were on budget. We thought the thing was going to be somewhere, it was only 200 square feet, less than that. It was like 20 by 10. It's super skinny, 20 feet long, but it had a loft in it that you could get up some really steep steps. And when it was all drawn up, by now, just the skyrocketing availability of homes here, the contractor told it was going to be $400,000. Needless to say, we built it. But I just think what the county or city is estimating at $50,000, you must be really affordable, Bob, because I was just, Bud. I was amazed at how much, the contractors wanted. I think maybe he had an expensive one and maybe he's going to try and bid it again, but maybe once you go out to bid, it might be even scarier.
No, I actually met with 5 contractors and only one would give me an estimate.
They're busy.
That's the reality around here. All of the contractors are busy.
No, just a few comments. The 3 that I referenced all had foundations that were good, walls, roof. We didn't had to re-roof anything. So all the expense of doing that, if you don't have that, would be added to what. So if you're building new, yes, the number is going to get bigger, 50% or 100% bigger. The second one is, and I don't want to sound too silly here, but I'm in business because I like it. I'm not in business to try to make as much money as I can. And so we work cheap, we do a good thing, we get paid, we go home, we're happy. Every person that we've worked with is a personal friend. And that's just the way it is. But to me, that's part of being a human being in town. And I think there's lots of other human beings, so why not exploit that? The city can help that. I think just the idea of $25,000. And think about that. So I was thinking, going through those numbers. Those are real numbers. Okay, so if you spend $25,000 and you're renting $600, that's $7,000. In 4 years, you get your capitalized cost back, and a person lives for 40 years for $600 a month. That's a win. Anyway, so that's one way to have that happen. Thank you.
Can I say 2 things? So this sparked 2 thoughts for me. The first is, it's a statement that I think goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is that the need for affordable housing and building these units that are set at affordable rates, that needs to be long-term, because that doesn't only improve the health of our community, but I also failed to mention to you earlier that I think it's safe to say that the fastest growing population in our homeless housing interest pool are seniors, people 55 and older. The average age of individuals staying at the night-by-night shelters in King County and beyond is 55. So if we look at our changing generations and the faces of our community and recognizing that more people are living longer and the cost of aging is very, very high, we know that more seniors are going to experience homelessness in their lifetime. So the need for long-term and affordable housing is really, really critical. And the second thing I wanted to say that you made me think of is, I don't know if this exists, and if it does, somebody please tell me, but I would love to see professional ethics set for the landlords. I just finished my master's in social work, and a big part of my education was learning the ethical standards of being a social worker. So I do not know if something like this exists for the growing and evolving profession of being a landlord, but for a lot of people, this is their livelihood. Being a landlord is their primary business. And I think that's wonderful. And I would love to see some ethical standards developed.
Is there any such thing, Bud?
Does it exist?
I've seen quite the reverse, frankly.
That's what I said.
Oh, dear. Okay, Jeff.
I'm Jeff Mount. One thing I want to point out is that the last time it was measured, we spend $40,000 a year per homeless person in this county. So the money's being spent anyway. We might as well spend them to get a roof over their heads rather than incarceration and hospitalization. So it's just a question of priorities. And the other question, Dustin, I had was, how much capacity of childcare are you looking to put in the facility? I mean, how much capacity are you looking to add?
I don't know. So there are a lot of calculations about the need for outdoor space. It's a 9,000 square foot lot. There are some calculations from the state that would require, under certain licensure, to have 4,000 square feet of just outdoor space, which would mean that we couldn't build a building. So we're having to really have a critical look at that. Our goal is for there to be 35 spots. So, a minority of those would be AFC served, but the majority of those would not.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
I just have one more comment.
Okay.
Sorry. So I moved here 25 years ago, and the cheapest place I could find to rent was $650 a month. And so I don't know how people are doing it today on $650 when it was that cost 25 years ago.
So I just wanted to make a comment about this issue about the big, tall apartment building that's going up, and I've been working with some people that aren't happy about it because it's in our neighborhood, and the fact that, we totally recognize the need for increased density close in, more affordable units, all that stuff. And I would love to see it happen in the way of townhomes and ADUs and, cottage clusters and that kind of thing, but there will be some apartment buildings and things. But the thing that I think that if you care about affordable housing, that we should, the city has, in the new municipal code, there's the option of a bonus height for a builder that will build either a certain percentage of smaller units, 600 square feet or less, but they don't have to be affordable. Or there's a formula which I misread when I first read it and thought it would be, okay, so then, or 25% of the units have to be affordable. That's great, but if you really read the formula, if this 25 square unit building would be required to have one affordable unit. Because, it's just complicated. So the number of, it has to, I can't remember exactly what it was, but has to have at least a third of the number of units that are on the bonus floor. So if there's, 3 units, then it has to have one. But it doesn't apply to the total number of units in the whole building. And I've asked the cities to look at that and change that, because I don't think that formula provides adequate affordability. So if anybody else agrees with me, they could write a letter.
Any comment on that?
The city is currently looking at the moratorium. The moratorium will lapse in April. All indication is that they will renew the moratorium, and that the moratorium, so the moratorium, for everybody that doesn't know, is on the bonus height provision. So it stops the fifth floor allowance, essentially, or the additional floor for affordable or small units. The problem with the moratorium as it exists is that it covers the entire west side of commercial, including in the hospital overlay, which is including AFC properties. So we are asking for that remedy to exist, but all indication is that the moratorium will be renewed in some form or fashion in April.
Angie, anybody else who's after Angie? Or are we all getting done?
When, I don't know everybody's name, I can't read the tags from here, but your name, Katie. So you talked about a little bit about infill. And this is sort of a really big deal to me. I'm just a total advocate for the Growth Management Act and really feel like we have to be thoughtfully planning into the future. And there's always attempts every year to butcher that. And I see so many buildings that are just not occupied. They're not renewed, they're not occupied, and then we just do greenfield development, pushing out into the urban growth areas or out into the rural areas where it's cheap and easy to build, and that's not affordable. It just makes all of our services have to travel out, the ambulances, the service vehicles and everything. It's not walkable, it doesn't get elderly people close to hospitals and so on. So I really hope that as we go forward, we can have solutions, and I was excited to hear that you're using an existing old building and renovating it, that we do those kinds of things. I know just in Oak Harbor, we have a couple of Navy buildings that are in town that aren't used, especially by Skagit Valley College. Nobody's using them. We can convert them, and they're doing this in some other areas like malls that nobody shops at anymore, turning them actually into elderly care places where they utilize each individual store to be different types of activities. They have communal areas to cook. And I think we could do that if we can come up with ways in the energy code and other codes. And this is coming from someone who served on the State Building Code Council. Energy code, but we have to have common sense solutions to these things. And I'd love to see us use these existing structures and not just look for the easy way out and then leave blighted cities. That's not a problem in Anacortes, surely, but it is in other areas.
Who wants to comment to that?
No, okay, Wim,
Anybody else? Wim has another, did you have another Marie after Wim? Okay.
First, Angie, you stole my thunder. I was going to bring up that Macy's is closing. Because I thought the same thing. But on a similar note, we've all grown up with the idea that we're going to do it better than our parents, or our parents at least thought that we would be doing better than them. But if you go back 50, 80 years, people would rent a room instead of wanting to rent a whole house or a whole ADU. And it was very common for, let's call it, old ladies in a big house to rent out 4 rooms. And that's how they could pay for the house. Right now here in Anacortes, I bet that there are a lot of 2,500 square foot houses occupied by a single person. So I kind of wonder if there could be some kind of program to promote renting out a room.
So for a long time, the AFC, and we will still do this if somebody calls, operated a program that Eric Johnson started called FISH. It was Fidalgo Island Share a Home. And if somebody called and had a room to rent, then we would have a client that was working through our program, and we wouldn't endorse either side, but we would arrange a meeting and see if there was a synergy or a relationship that could be developed and a rental outcome from that. We will still do that today. So if somebody does have a room to rent, the nice part about coming out of our program is, you know, that they've been background checked and drug tested on a regular basis, and that we've worked really hard on life skill development and things like that. And all of our clients also graduate with a rent readiness certificate that is a standardized program of 5 weeks that teaches basic landlord-tenant law. And all of our clients graduate with that program. Yeah.
And at Community Action of Skagit, we also have been looking at room sharing arrangements, and many of our clients are able to find a room for rent, and we will pay rent towards that room. Additionally, when case managers, we have our case staffings, and it sounds like maybe so-and-so's client is interested in a room, and so is somebody else's client, then we'll do kind of I guess it's like a blind date, a matching, to introduce the two to each other to see if they're interested in pursuing a unit or a 2-bedroom together to make it more affordable. So that's definitely been a strategy that we've been turning to and utilizing. For those that are not in a rental assistance program, we don't at this time have, there's a program that exists up in Whatcom County. It's called, I think it's called Roommate Cafe. And it's tagged on to their housing lab, which is open to the public. And anyone who is searching for housing can go to the housing lab and get some assistance with figuring out where to look and how do I submit my application and make my application look complete and good. And tagged onto that is the roommate cafe. So those who want to share a home or a unit with more than one person, they can meet and mingle and submit their applications together. We're talking about that at Community Action of Skagit, but we're not yet implementing it, but hopefully that's on the near horizon.
Okay, Maureen.
I could probably go with that.
What?
Probably go with that. So my question tonight is, I misunderstood or was a little confused by the Wilson building and these new units that they're talking about for the Wilson unit. Are they going to?
Did I say Wilson? I meant Olson.
Olson, okay. That's the red building downtown.
Yes.
Okay.
Green hardware.
So are they thinking of adding floors to it to get these units?
Not
So-
currently.
So part of the building's not being used at all now?
That's correct. The second floor has been deemed undwellable. So
And they can get 30 in there? How many?
they can get, I think they're hoping for 15 to 20. But I don't know, units. Yeah, but I don't know that they've exactly planned that out yet.
But they're not planning to raise the height of it to?
Not currently.
Okay. All right. that
Again,
makes sense, please.
I just want to preface, I'm not with the Housing Authority. I don't know the internal workings, but based on my understanding, no, currently that is not the plan.
Okay, anybody else? Well, I guess we're done. Let's thank our speaker. Thank you so much. Big landmark.
Yeah, good, thank you, good to see you.
I have something to look
Okay, so